Distinguished colleagues, thank you for the invitation to the 20th China International Conference on Distance Education. My topic today is Achieving Lifelong Learning in the Age of Digitization. What are the possibilities? But first, let me say a little bit about the Commonwealth of Learning, or COL. As you know, COL is an intergovernmental organization that works in 54 countries spanning all regions of the globe. Our mission is to help Commonwealth member states and institutions to use technologies for expanding access to education and training. COL believes that learning is the key to sustainable development. Learning must lead to opportunities for economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental conservation. This aligns us closely with the Sustainable Development Goal 4, which aspires to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all by 2030. In this presentation, I will first focus briefly on what we understand by lifelong learning. This will be followed by examples of how 3 Commonwealth countries are implementing lifelong learning. Technology has a major role in promoting lifelong learning for all, and I will highlight this with examples from COL's work. In conclusion, I will look at the way forward as we try to achieve lifelong learning for all by 2030. But first, what do we mean by lifelong learning? The term may have emerged in the 1960s, but the concept goes back to ancient times. The Edgar Fore report made the initial statement on lifelong education, which highlighted a holistic approach for the complete development of the individual. At that time in the 1970s, the focus was on education. But in 1996, when the Delors report came out, we can see a transition from education to learning. Now, formal education only accounts for a small fraction of the time we spend in learning. In 16 waking hours during grades 1 to 12, we spend about 18.5% time in formal learning environments. And this keeps decreasing as we transition to tertiary education. The rest of our waking lives are spent in informal learning environments. As we know, lifelong learning is a continuum from the cradle to the grave. It can take place in formal, non-formal, and informal contexts. And the motivation could be employment-related or personal, social, or cultural. Open universities have typically provided learning opportunities from the cradle to the grave. The mission statement of the Open University of Malaysia commits to widening access to quality education, but it goes beyond higher education to include lifelong learning. Sukhothai Thammathirat Open University in Thailand aims to use distance education to open up opportunities for lifelong learning for all. The Open University of Sri Lanka also speaks of access, quality, and affordability for lifelong learning. As we know, COVID-19 has disrupted education across the world. But on the other hand, there has been a huge rise in self-directed learning during the pandemic, as we can see from the phenomenal increases in MOOC enrollments. So how can open and distance learning institutions build on these foundations to promote lifelong learning? With 6 years already into SDG 4, what are countries doing to accelerate progress towards achieving lifelong learning? Let us take the cases of 3 Commonwealth countries: Australia, Singapore, and South Africa. Australia promotes lifelong learning to skill and reskill citizens for a dynamic economy. Adult Learning Australia is the key organization promoting lifelong learning and life-wide learning. It addresses issues related to literacy, non-formal learning, indigenous education, young people, aging populations, and rural Australia. Australia has always believed in the power of open and distance learning from the early days when homeschooling was common. There is no comprehensive national policy on lifelong learning which would serve to coordinate the formal, non-formal, and informal sectors. However, Australia has an overarching national qualifications framework that includes recognition of prior learning so that credit can be given for non-formal and informal learning. The Australian qualifications framework has served as a model for developing qualifications frameworks internationally. Now, Singapore aims to build a competitive economy by investing in Singaporeans to develop their fullest potential through continuous skilling and reskilling. The government provides the funds for several programs that support career guidance, job searches, and placements. The Singapore government has invested significant resources in lifelong learning. All Singapore citizens aged 25 and above receive an opening credit of 500 Singaporean dollars to encourage them to take ownership of their skills development and lifelong learning. In addition, a mid-career enhancement subsidy covers up to 90% of course fees for those over the age of 40, so that older members of the workforce can become lifelong learners. South Africa has a visionary national policy and strategy on lifelong learning, which aims to redress post-apartheid social inequities. To enhance recognition of learning and learner mobility, the South African National Qualifications Framework encompasses learning through all stages of life, from early childhood to adult education and higher education. There are strong linkages between skills, training, and the labour market, and the government has launched a national career advice portal. South Africa believes in open and distance learning as a viable strategy for achieving lifelong learning. As far back as 1995, the African National Congress stated, and I quote, that to meet the challenge of lifelong learning successfully, we need to recognize the delivery of education and training within an open learning framework, unquote. As we have seen, these countries have adopted various strategies: qualifications frameworks, distance learning, financial incentives. Lifelong learning is understood differently in different contexts, as we have seen. And in spite of the attempts to broaden the frame of reference, we still find the focus on the formal education sector. Governments are playing an active role, but there is a need for better coordination between different ministries and stakeholders. So, what can be the role of technology in implementing lifelong learning? And what does the CALL experience show us? The recent EDUCAUSE Horizon report highlights the top technology trends and practices. Artificial intelligence tops the list, followed by blended course models, learning analytics, and micro-credentials. Open educational resources, or OER, and quality online learning were also considered very important. How can we ensure that we use appropriate and affordable technologies to leave no one behind? In India, women entrepreneurs at the bottom of the economic pyramid established a farm producers company with CALL support. These illiterate women learnt corporate finance through their basic mobile phones. These opportunities for learning have resulted in empowerment. Now here is Mary Arogia, a school dropout and grandmother who knew nothing about computers. As part of CALL's Lifelong Learning for Farmers project, she is now working as a content and web manager for a farmers organization. She has uploaded hundreds of resources on YouTube, Facebook, and trained over 1,000 other farmers like herself. MOOCs continue to provide opportunities for lifelong learning. CALL has tailored blended MOOCs to suit the needs of developing countries, and these gardeners in remote locations have been reached by an audio MOOC through their basic mobile phones. The CALL Coursera Workforce Recovery Project has skilled and reskilled over 150,000 Commonwealth youth for livelihoods. And in developing countries where there was no connectivity, learners used library facilities to connect with the courses or used their own mobile phones. The Open University of China too started out with using radio and TV technologies and now uses a range of online methods to reach the unreached with lifelong learning opportunities. The CALL experience shows that ICTs by itself will not help us achieve lifelong learning, but must be placed in an appropriate social, political, and economic context. The bottom billion can be reached by providing simple technology solutions such as basic mobile phone interface, social media integration, and open content designed for delivery in low bandwidth situations. Technology solutions designed for the last person in the queue have the potential to benefit even privileged constituencies. In conclusion, let us reflect on the possibilities going forward. As we have seen, if we have to achieve lifelong learning for all, then we will have to go beyond the business as usual approach and shift the current paradigms. First, there is a need to shift the emphasis from formal education alone to a blend of formal, non-formal, and informal learning. The teacher-led sequential learning in formal education needs to be supplemented with unstructured learner-led approaches to support the learning needs of individuals at different stages of their lives. Open and distance learning can be a very powerful means of not just expanding access to formal education, but also supporting non-formal and informal learning, as you have seen from the CALL experience. The operationalization of lifelong learning involves moving beyond pedagogy to the integration of three approaches: pedagogy, andragogy, and heutagogy. In pedagogy, the learner depends on the teacher for what and how to learn. Under andragogy, the adult learners are more independent, learn what they need to, and use their own experiences. But what is learned is still determined by the teacher. The heutagogic approach applies to the independent learner who determines what and how to learn, and the learning is not planned and can take place anywhere. Blaschke's pyramid reflects the lifelong learning process. Engagement indicates participation, while cultivation refers to autonomous and self-directed learning. Realization occurs when the learner is mature and autonomous and can transform circumstances rather than simply be transformed by them. So, can heutagogy be integrated into formal learning programs? According to Blaschke, educators in the nursing, engineering, and education professions have found heutagogy to be a credible response to the critical issues that learners are faced with. The University of Western Sydney has implemented the heutagogical approach in its teacher education program, which resulted in improved teacher outcomes and more capable teachers. Another study shows that the heutagogical approach in 3 higher education institutions in the UK led to reflective learning. Second, formal learning relies on codified knowledge, which constitutes about 20% of what we know. Informal learning is based on tacit knowledge, which is informal, personal, intuitive, or acquired through our experience. Think of the large reserves of indigenous knowledge, language, and cultures that are not yet part of global knowledge flows. Let me quote, "The centrality of tacit knowledge to the production and reproduction of society has typically been unrecognized," unquote, and is one of the hidden dimensions of lifelong learning. Livingstone, who said that his study is based on new approaches to lifelong learning in Canada, and this study showed that more than 70% of the workers identified informal and tacit learning as the most important source of job knowledge. There's evidence to show that informal and tacit learning is the main source of knowledge generation among farmers in many Commonwealth countries. The present approaches have focused more on acquiring skills and competencies for livelihoods, helping adapt to the changing circumstances, and the main emphasis is still on formal learning. The third shift would be to move beyond acquiring skills and competencies to transformative learning. This would mean not just adapting to changing circumstances, but acquiring the ability to change circumstances. According to Mezirow, transformative learning enables us to make our own interpretations rather than act on the beliefs, judgments, and feelings of others. We need to make our own interpretations, Transformative learning develops autonomous thinkers. The SDGs aim to transform the world for people, planet, prosperity, and peace. If such goals are to be achieved, lifelong learning should be perceived beyond acquiring skills and competencies and focus on empowerment. Such an approach will also lead to environmental conservation and peace. So what can governments do? Governments can focus on a holistic approach for transforming their societies. Existing accreditation mechanisms which focus on formal education need to be revisited to include non-formal and informal learning as well. Governments can adopt a targeted approach to promoting indigenous knowledge, languages, and cultures. Policies on ICT infrastructure and governance will determine how technology can close rather than widen the divides. Incentives for lifelong learning will be important to ensure that this transition takes place. Institutions, what can they do? They too have a key role to play in providing seamless pathways between learning that takes place in different contexts and times. Learning approaches, credentialing, and recognition strategies will need to change. ODL and technology-enabled learning will be major mechanisms in dealing with the magnitude of the challenge, particularly providing cost-effective ways to lifelong learning opportunities for all. So let me leave you with the image of this learner who completed her secondary school with distinction at the age of 94. She is the highly motivated Katyayani, who has not only transformed herself, but is also inspiring and motivating others around her to become lifelong learners. Can we set up systems and processes that help support lifelong learners like her? I leave that question to you, and with that, thank you for your kind attention.